The creep from PE class. I had mostly forgotten about this until I started reading this subreddit and figured I'd share something. This all started about 4 years ago when I was a junior in high school and continued until 2 months into my senior year. My PE class announced our next unit was going to be volleyball. I'm a semi-competent volleyball player. Now, I didn't play for the school team or anything like that, but I can get the ball across the net and not let it hit the ground on our side. Apparently, this amount of skill was enough to impress one of the boys who was in said class. For the rest of the semester, he followed me around class. We were running a lap around the field. He was running alongside me, asking me questions like, "You're pretty tan. What's your tan line like?" Or, "What ethnicity are you?" "You're pretty white." But it seems like there might be something else too. He was right. My great-grandpa wasn't white, but yikes, dude. We were getting into groups. I sure made my group had enough people in it, or he was going to be in it for sure. I knew it was creepy, but I was a very naive child who kind of brushed it off with a short laugh and started running faster or whatever to get away because I had no idea how to handle it. I started asking my friends about this guy, and it turns out that this is how he has done with a lot of girls. Okay then, I thought to myself, I guess I'll just continue to give him short answers to stuff and hope it stops. Going back to that whole naive thing, after about a week, I figured he's not harming anything, and so I talked with him more than I should have. At this point, he was coming up to me and my friend group after PE and talking with just me. After the first semester of this, it stops. Boy, was I grateful. I didn't know how to deal with him at all. Turns out, it only stopped because he started dating our head drum major. I was in the band, assistant drum major. I thought it was an interesting relationship to say the least, because of how he had treated me, but hey, he wasn't bothering me anymore, and they seemed happy enough. Towards the end of the year, we had our school Black Light Rally, which was one of the highlights of the year. Afterwards, I'm helping wheel the marambas back to the band room, and who comes up? The same guy. So it's me, my best friend, and a big-ass marimba, trekking across the expanse of asphalt behind the gym to get back to the band room. Enter PE guy, who for whatever reason was riding a skateboard alongside us pushing the marimba. He said hi, asked if we needed any help at all, and despite us not saying anything, proceeded to try and put his hand over mine on the marimba stand. I immediately moved my hand and he tried again. When I moved my hand a second time, he got the message. Kinda tried to help for another little bit, but then took off on his skateboard. I thought it was extremely weird at the time, but apparently him and the head drum major had broken up at this point, or very shortly broke up afterwards. I forget exactly. So he was free and could pursue other girls. Luckily for me, that did include other girls other than me. After the marimba incident, I don't think I saw this guy for the rest of the school year. I thought I was free of him and he was just one more creepy guy I could add to my list of stories to tell, but that was not the case. Shortly before senior year, I found out that my family was moving 2 months into the school year. Yay, I told all my friends. We determined to have as good of a time as we can with the time I had left, yada yada yada. It got down my last day of school before moving. I just had to skip my art class to go hang out with my friends, who had second lunch and didn't normally see during the day, so I could be with them one last time. Well, who showed up? The guy from my PE class. He came up to me and said, "I hear you're moving." I didn't really know how to respond to that other than, "Yeah, I am, it's my last day here." Wrong move. Instead of saying, "I'll miss you," or a normal goodbye, "Have a great time and good luck," that I wish he left me with, he decided to come up from behind me and hug me. I was so startled, I didn't really know what to do. One of my good friends came up to the lunch group about that time and gave me a weird look, which I returned because I didn't know what to do. Said creepy guy hugged me for what felt like forever and then, before leaving, gave me a kiss on the cheek. I was frozen for a moment after he left. All I could think was, did that just really happen? It did. My friends confirmed it for me, and we all agreed that he was extremely fucking creepy. A month or 2 after I had moved, he sent me a friend request on Facebook. I denied it though. I don't think I ever blocked him now that I think about it, so creepy boy. Let's not meet ever again, please. Chased down through a dark forest. This happened a long time ago. I'd say this happened when I was around 8 years old, so 11 years ago. My family and I were on holiday in Spain, in a city close to Barcelona. We went to a very big and luxurious resort with a ton of sports fields. From basketball to soccer, it took up a lot of space, and it had tall fences around the perimeter to make sure no one could get on at night. To give you some perspective on the whole matter, I think they had 8 soccer fields, 4 basketball courts, 2 rugby fields, and probably some more. During the daytime, all the fields are full of people playing sports, and it was always a ton of fun there, but at night, the perimeter closes. I stayed late with a friend. I don't remember his name, so we'll call him Brian. So Brian and I didn't want to go home yet, so we stayed a little bit longer to shoot penalties on the soccer field. Eventually, they closed the fence, but since we were too far away for them to see us and vice versa, we only found out that the fence was closed when we tried to leave. This was already scary. It was a huge, unlit place in a foreign country surrounded by big fences. After freaking out for a little bit, we decided we didn't want to get into trouble, so we set out to follow the fence to look for holes through which we could escape instead of calling for help. After a solid 20 minutes, we find a hole, but it's not connected to the resort but to a dark forest. We figured it wasn't a large forest and that it would be safe, given it's right next to this resort. We go through the hole and start crossing the forest. A mere 5 minutes later, we enter a large bare spot with an old, damaged, graffiti concrete shed. We avoided it best we could, but soon we heard some glass bottles moving around inside the shed. Out walks this man. He stares at us for like 10 seconds, as we are paralyzed by fear. He looked very deranged, probably had been homeless for the larger part of his life. His clothes were ripped, hair and beard very long and disgusting. He even had a limp. He coughs, which wakes up another man in the shed. This man looks exactly like Charles Padishik from Breaking Bad. They start to walk slowly in our direction, talking to us in Spanish. We slowly back up. They see this and they charge. They start running, screaming, and throwing stuff at us. We are running for our lives. The forest itself is pitch black. We can barely see ahead of us, let alone see if there's an end to the seemingly infinite forest. After about 10 minutes of running, we reached the edge of the forest. We were on a small town road next to a huge cliff. No houses, no people, still being chased. We followed the road uphill, finally gaining some ground on the homeless psychopaths. The road ends. The only thing we see is a mansion without any burning lights. We figured it's all or nothing, and we climb their gate and hide in their backyard. The homeless men follow us, but by the time they manage to get in, we are already hidden in some dense, dark bushes. They made quite a bit of noise, which woke up the residents. Out comes a man screaming and looking around his garden. He closely passes us but doesn't see us. He was holding a gun. Didn't get a close look, but I think it was a shotgun, an older one that holds 2 shells. He obviously spots the homeless man and fires a warning shot into the air. The Charles Padishik-looking man charges him, but gets knocked down as well. He forces the homeless man out of his garden at gunpoint. We felt safe for a second, until we realized that we were in a shotgun-wielding man's garden, and that we now don't know where the homeless men were. We wait a little bit to be sure that the man is asleep, and that the homeless men have all left. When we leave, think around 30 minutes later, the men are gone, and the roads are quiet. We follow the same road, but now downhill and run into a small town. We still have no idea where in the world we are. It has been 3 hours since we left the resort, and we finally realize what just happened and freak out. After walking for 10 to 15 minutes, we see a house with people inside the living room. We ring the bell and try to ask the way. Most Spanish people don't speak Dutch, and we didn't really speak English, so it didn't go too well. We told the name of the resort and she points downhill. This seems like a fairly standard road. We stick closely to the houses and follow the road. I didn't think this at the time, but apparently, there is an abandoned slaughterhouse close to the entrance to the resort. We heard Dutch voices from somewhere around the building, so we go in to ask directions. Enter a bloody hellhole. Everywhere is blood. On the floor, on the walls, on the equipment, even on the ceiling. Bloody knives everywhere. Wasn't a very nice experience. The other people run into us and we ask directions. It's a 2-minute walk away. When we finally get to the resort, the staff don't let us in because they don't know if we're residents of the resort or not. They make us tell them the houses of our parents to come and get us. There were still pancakes left when I got back and I played Pokemon with my brother. My mom gave me 10 euros for the arcade the next day, which is when my bike got stolen. Swimming pool watcher who tried to possibly kill us. This happened when I was about 11 years old. My 2 friends and I, all of us male, were swimming in my friend's backyard one night at around 10 p.m. My friend's house borders the junior high school property and is separated by a chain-linked fence. As we were swimming, I look over and I see a tall man dressed in black and a baseball cap standing there zombie-like just watching us. For some reason, I didn't get scared. I just thought it was weird. I mentioned him to my friends who both look over and immediately start screaming their heads off and swimming to get away and out of the pool. Their reaction woke me the fuck up to the reality of the situation and I almost shit my swimming suit. We are one by one trying to use the ladder and I was in the rear, so as I'm waiting I look over and the guy is scrambling up the fence as fast as he can. We made it to the house and managed to slam the door and lock it as he reaches the door. This was the back door, which was like 80% clear glass, so he just stood there looking at us as we screamed our heads off. I notice he's holding a fucking baseball bat. We run and hide behind the living room couch. He keeps juggling the doorknob, but luckily never uses the bat to break the glass, which would have been honestly easy. He walks away, and my friend runs and turns the security alarm on and calls his dad, who was off running errands at the time. My friend's dad said he was almost home and to stay inside no matter what. Anyways, we turn the TV on and start to calm down when all of a sudden the fucking alarm goes off. I almost shit my swimming suit for the second time, and our stupid 11-year-old minds decide just stand there screaming was the best option. My friend's dad happened to get home while this is happening. He gives the operator the secret password and that everything is good, grabs his gun and searches the property, and didn't find anyone. We still swam at night after that, and never met that crazy dude again. Also, I'm 25 years old now, and don't ask why we didn't just call the cops, or why my friend's dad didn't call the cops. I have no idea why we didn't. The guy on the trail. It was winter of 2015, and I was working at a doctor's office in Branson, Missouri. I just got a new iPhone and was excited to try out the time-lapse mode for its camera. On my drive home from work one early evening, I decided to stop and capture the sunset over Table Rock Lake. It was a gorgeous evening, and the winter sun would be setting soon. I parked my SUV at a state park entry point parking lot, and mine was the only car in sight, but that did not alarm me. I hopped out and realized how incredibly chilly it was. It was sunny, but blistering cold. I opened the back of my vehicle and put on some gloves and a better pair of shoes. Then I took off down a trail that led to the edge of the lake. I noticed the Branson Belle showboat slowly making its way across the lake for its sunset voyage, and I thought it'd be neat to capture it in the time-lapse. I was a single 31-year-old female with a lifetime of experience doing risky things on my own without consequences. The path down to the water was marked with large rocks on each side. I was in a hurry to get down to the shore and get into recording position. I lost my footing and fell down hard. My head rested on a pointy-shaped big rock that I think would have knocked me out had I not managed to literally stop the impact at the moment we collided. My knee and one of my hands stung badly. It suddenly hit me how stupid this was, because no one knew where I was, and I nearly cut my own head off on a vacant trail in freezing temperatures with it being minutes from dark nonetheless. As I sat there, recovering from the fall, I decided I was close enough to the shore, and I just filmed right where I fell. I was about to find out that falling down was the least of my worries. "Can I borrow a light?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned around and there he was. He was standing about 20 feet behind me. I replied to him that I was sorry, but I didn't have a lighter because I didn't smoke. "I saw you getting out of your car up here. You have a real nice ass." Where had he been? There certainly wasn't a soul in sight where I parked and headed down this trail. The next part, you might find it hard to believe, because I myself cannot grasp that there are people out there like this, but his fourth sentence to me, and within less than a minute of appearing, he said, "Do you want to fuck?" I knew I was in a lot of trouble. No one would hear me if I were to scream. Sure, the Branson Bell was out in the water, but it was several football field lengths away, and I'm sure I was invisible to them at the point. They wouldn't hear me over the sounds of the massive ship anyways. Without missing a beat, I told them it was just too cold to do it outside, and we should go to my car to do it instead. I pretended to be interested. In my mind, I just knew I needed to get off this trail before the sun went down, and obviously, I'd abandoned capturing the sunset. I don't recall all the things he said during the walk up to the parking lot, but when he asked if he could touch my butt during the walk, I happily agreed. I knew it was a test. I still wasn't 100% sure he was going to let me make it off the trail, and anything I do or say to please him on that walk was my ticket out. How had I got myself into this awful situation? God, I was stupid. Just please, let me make it out of this, and I swear I will be smarter. He kept his hand down the back of my pants for the rest of the walk. We made it to the parking lot, but much to my disappointment, I was still the only car there, other than a vehicle that wasn't parked in a real spot and hadn't been there earlier. I knew it was his car. He'd been hiding and watching me, and then he pulled up to the trail entrance and left his car at it before he began following me as well. You may ask why I didn't call 911 on the trail. Well, he was watching my every move, and I wanted to make it off the trail unharmed and alive. I figured it being below freezing was a good excuse to refuse to do what he wanted to do out there on the trail, but please him by promising to do it somewhere warmer. Unfortunately, the parking lot was far enough off the regular highway that passing cars couldn't see. My next mission was to make it to my own vehicle and escape. We were standing by his car, and he continued saying things that he was going to do to me that seemed too graphic for me to write about. I was still playing along. I tried to get his name, and I tried to get his number out of him as well, but he refused on both. Why would someone refuse to give you even their name? He began unzipping his pants and trying to get me to do things to him. So I insisted we walk to my SUV. First, though, he grabbed something out of his car, and I never got a good look at it, but I'm pretty sure it was a handgun. We walked across the parking lot towards my car. I pushed unlock, knowing that only pushing it once would only unlock the driver's side door. I had my keys in ready position. I jumped in as he attempted to open the passenger door. I threw it in reverse and backed up as the tires spun on loose gravel. Then I put it into drive and floored it. I was too afraid to look in the rearview mirror. I called 911 and gave them his description. Oddly, he was a handsome enough guy, stood about 6 foot tall, blonde, brown eyes, medium fair skin, a slightly muscular build and nice features, probably around 25 to 30 years old. You wouldn't look at him and think anything remarkable or otherwise. I wasn't ever in a position to see his license plate, but I told them about his car. He drove an older, probably early 90s pale blue car. It reminded me of my great-grandma's Oldsmobile. I didn't even have a first name to give them. After taking down my information, I never heard from anyone regarding my report again. I may never know what exactly he has done, but I do know that I sensed the presence of absolute evil that evening. Football flop. I was in second grade, and it was another average Sunday filled with football parties. That Sunday might have been the Super Bowl, but I can't remember exactly. My parents were hosting a party, and hers were at one of our neighbors' parties, with both of us being little girls. We weren't very interested in sticking around for the game or listening to adults shove food down their throats and scream at TVs for a couple of hours. If you haven't seen an American football party or gathering, people take it like it's a religious feast and sacrament. We decided to go take a walk around the neighborhood to get a breath of fresh air with my puppy. Amongst our short walk, we wound up at the ditch, which we ran around for a couple minutes with my dog, when, for a lack of a better description, a man who appeared to be the real-life Peter Griffin, which for some reason I recognized he looked like that character, but only being 7 years old, I didn't know the name, exited a dingy-looking standard old car. He kind of waddled over to us and asked, "Excuse me, have you two girls seen a black cat around here?" We shook our heads, and immediately I could tell something was off with this guy. Beady little eyes darting behind the circular wire glasses, and almost a nervous shuffle raised a flag in my head. Even the puppy was staying at the side instead of running around for pets from this guy. He then proposed, "Can you help me look for her?" while holding out his arms, palms up. I'm not sure what his point of motion was for, nor do I care to reflect on it now. Little second grade me had sudden flashbacks of Yellow Dino, which was some character that talks about stranger danger, which we had watched the previous week. My idiotic friend cheerfully replied, "Sure, why shouldn't know?" I grabbed her by the wrist and started sprinting with her to our neighbor's nearby house, where her parents were. They were less concerned about the fact that we were nearly abducted, and more that I had my puppy in the house, so we got kicked out and sent back to my house. I told my parents, and they were generally alarmed, but also too invested in their party to particularly do anything about it, so there was never any closure. We never ran into that man ever again, luckily. Racquetball. This story happened around 2000 to 2001 in Ohio, when I was a senior in high school. Before I start, it's important to note that when I was in elementary school, I was the paper boy for my neighborhood. At the corner of one of the streets I delivered papers to was a funeral home. It was a family business owned and operated by two brothers. They were in their 40s or 50s, and they lived at the funeral home. They had a small personal house attached to the back of the actual funeral parlor. At that age, I thought it was crazy to live in a house attached to a funeral home, but they were always nice to me and tipped well when I made my collections at the end of every month, so I got over the weirdness of the situation after a while. Because of this experience when I was younger, my story might make more sense. My senior year of high school, I got a part-time job as a janitor at a health club. It was easy work. I mopped the floors, took out the trash, and helped with the club's laundry. The pay was shit, but it was cool because I got a free membership and was allowed to work out for free whenever I wanted. I was 6'1", 225 pounds, and played sports in high school. I was a pretty big dude for my age. Anyways, at this health club, racquetball was a huge deal. They had ongoing tournaments and leagues for men and women. The guys that played racquetball were mostly in their late 40s or early 50s. I got to know them because I was in charge of sweeping and mopping the courts before their game started, and we would always shoot the shit as they were stretching and getting ready to play. I never played racquetball a day in my life, but after watching these guys play all the time, I got into it. The only thing that I didn't was have a racket, and they were honestly kind of expensive. One day, as I'm standing outside the racquetball courts watching, an older guy comes over and starts talking to me. My first impression was that he was out of place. I'd never seen him before, and he was a fair bit out of shape. We made small talk about the game, and he immediately started asking personal questions. Where did I go to school? How old I was? How long I've been working here? I wasn't naive. I knew this dude had some kind of an angle. I figured he was gay and was chatting me up because I worked there and was a big guy. I didn't necessarily feel threatened by any means. I just kind of kept talking to him, but steered the conversation back to the racquetball. I mentioned how I wanted to start playing myself, but I don't have a racket. As soon as I said this, he blurts out that he has a used racket that he could give me. I knew it was weird, but told him that would be great, and if it's not too much trouble, ask him to bring it to the club the next time he comes. He says, sure. I thanked him, and excused myself to get back to my janitor shit. I see him the very next day at the club. We say hi, and he tells me he's so sorry, but he forgot the racket at home. No big deal, you can just bring it to the club anytime. He isn't satisfied. He grabs a piece of paper from the reception desk and writes something down and hands it to me. This is my address. Why don't you swing by my place and pick it up sometime? Again, I'm not stupid, but in all honesty, I really wanted a racket, so I took the piece of paper and asked him when would be a good time to drop by. I'm free all day tomorrow, he said. Sounds good. I'll see you then. I shoved the paper back in my pocket and got back to mopping floors. Later that night, I'm at home talking to my girlfriend and told her all about this guy. She kind of freaked out and tells me I'm crazy if I'm seriously thinking about going to this guy's house. Maybe I was being cocky or trying to sound tough, but I kept telling her, what's he gonna do to me? I'm twice his size. I'll knock him out if he touches me, blah 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 blah. It's Saturday morning, and I jump in my car and start driving to this guy's house. I didn't mention it before, but this was before I had a cell phone or a GPS inside of my car. I knew the part of town he lived in, but was driving around looking for his street for 20 or 30 minutes. I was just about to say fuck it and go home when I actually caught the street sign. I turned down the street and start counting down the addresses, looking at the piece of paper in my hand and then checking the numbers on the houses. As I get to the address, I felt like the wind got knocked out of me. It's a funeral home. I pull into the funeral home parking lot and sat there dazed for a minute. I'm thinking I must have read the wrong address or something like that. Nope, this is the address. I'm freaked out, but the memory of the funeral home on my paper route comes to me. I remember kind of laughing to myself because I can see how this would look creepy as fuck. But I used to deliver papers to a funeral home. Some people actually live there. It's not that crazy, I guess. So I walk to the front door and knock. Nobody answers. Knock again. Nobody answers. Now I'm pissed. He told me he was bringing the racket to the club and didn't. He gives me his address and forgets to mention it's a fucking funeral home. Not actually show up, and he's not answering his door? I felt like he was fucking with me, and that's why I kept knocking. I was like, alright man, I'm gonna play your game and we're gonna see how far this goes on to. The door pops open suddenly and it is the guy. He apologizes, saying that he didn't hear the knocking because he was finishing some work in his basement. I remember thinking, did he just say what I think he said? It sounded like a line out of a bad horror movie, to be honest. But before I could say anything, he tells me to follow him. We walked through an empty funeral home. It was weird. But it was all shit that I've seen before myself. When I was younger, around the same age I was delivering newspapers, I was an altar boy at my church. My brother and I served funerals for members of our church. Now that I think about it, probably had way more experience with funeral homes than any other kids my age. He keeps walking and I follow. He opens a door and starts going down to a lower level or a basement. I remember having a hard time swallowing as I walked down the steps, step by step by step. This was the point where I officially was in over my head. At that age, I had already been in a handful of fights and could protect myself, but this was different. This was the first time I can remember feeling like I was in a situation where I could straight up be killed or fucked up pretty bad. I didn't know if this guy had a weapon, or maybe other people were down there hiding and waiting for me, to ambush me, to attack me. As we walked down the stairs, I remember the smell of the cleaning products and the air conditioning. It was freezing and smelled like my chemistry classroom. He led me down to an office and opened the door. I walked in and saw caskets. This must have been his personal office, and it looked like a kind of showroom full of caskets. I'm freaked out because I'm alone in this basement with a stranger, not because of all the caskets. The caskets actually made sense in my mind. This guy probably met with the families of the departed, and this is where they chose which casket to use for the funeral. He walks into his office towards the desk, and I'm following directly behind him. I should mention that, as weird as this is, I have to admit, he didn't actually say anything that weird. He was making small talk the whole time, asking my plans for the weekend, how things were going at the gym, that kind of stuff. The circumstances of the situation were crazy, but he himself was super polite the whole entire time. He walks around the desk, and that's when I see them. There's a brand new racket, still in the packaging, next to a dead baby. I just stopped and stared. The baby wasn't in a casket. It was propped up with something, and there were brushes and cosmetics all over his desk. It was obvious he was preparing this child for a funeral. I've never seen a dead baby or child before. It was always somebody's grandma or an elderly man from my church. The skin was a weird color, and thank God the eyes were closed. He stood behind his desk and handed me the racket, said something like, "Here you go. I hope you get a lot out of it at the club." It was crazy because he was talking to me so naturally, while not acknowledging the dead baby sitting there. I looked at it and pretended to be really amazed. Thanks so much. This is really a nice racket. I ran out of shit to say and just stood there. He was actually the one that ended the conversation. He said sorry, but he's really busy and needs to get back to his work. I was so relieved. I said something like, "I'll see you at the gym," and just darted up the steps and out to the parking lot, as quick as I could. I was sitting in my car and took a deep breath. What the fuck was that all about? The first thing I thought was how unprofessional it was of him. If I was the father of that child and knew this guy was bringing strangers around my dead kid, I would be fucking furious. It felt really disrespectful to the departed. The second thing I thought was alright. I didn't get killed, raped, or kidnapped, and I have a brand new racket. Awesome. The weirdest part of this whole story, though, when the guy first told me about giving me a racket, he said he had a used one that he could give me. I was sure of it because I made a big deal of saying no thanks when he first offered, but he said he just bought a new one and didn't have any use for an older one. But the one I was holding was still in the new packaging and was really expensive, so what the fuck? This guy lied and went and brought this for me. For what? To try to impress me? Or was he fucking with me and wanted to scare me by having me see that dead kid? Did he get off to that? Or was it some kind of fetish? It's more than 10 years later, and I still have no idea why he did that. Racquetball funeral home guy, let's not meet again. Early morning swim. This happened about an hour ago. I live right on the southwest coast in England, and around 200 meters from my front door, there's a small beach with a tidal pool, a man-made swimming pool built with concrete that catches seawater. Seeing as we currently have a heat wave here, I thought today would be lovely to have a quick swim before my son wakes up for school. So my husband and son in their respective beds, I thought I'd go down at 6 a.m. for a nice swim. All was going well. I managed to do a few laps in the delightfully chilly water in peace until I heard a man shout good morning. Now where I live, that's a common occurrence, so I searched for the source of the voice and waved. "How is it?" said the man. I replied that it was refreshing, if not a bit cold, and that was that. I carried on my swim. 2 minutes later, the man decided to descend the 20 steps down to the pool with his towel in hand. Oh lovely, I thought. I assumed he was swimming too. He stood blocking the only exit out of the outside pool, the steps. If I wanted to leave, I'd have to swim over to the steps directly behind him. After a small talk about the weather and telling me his name, John said he normally comes down once a week with his friend, but his friend couldn't make it today. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said, "I would join you, but I don't have my swimming suit." Slightly odd, I thought, but possibly just a skinny dipper with his friends in the morning, so I let it slide. Then, to my horror, he put his hand down the front of his trousers and started playing with himself. I must have looked horrified. He then asked about my husband. "Husband not here then," he said. I responded that no, he was at home looking after our son before school, and that I should probably get going. I must have looked visibly uncomfortable because he started to walk back up the stairs, but not before shouting, "I'll see you tomorrow then!" Overly friendly or creepy? My radars were definitely going off.